welcome to the show to Cameron, who is CA conservative. Welcome to the show. Sorry if I butchered your name.
It's all good. It's all good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so much in line with the interviews that I have done earlier in the day, I want to talk about politics in a state that we both know about, and I guess that would be California, because a lot of different things happened this year. I noticed that Biden actually got a bigger share of the vote than Hillary Clinton did, but the margin might have been slightly down from 2016. So what happened?
Well, in large part, that's because of the reduction in the number of third-party votes, with many of them going to Biden. But the top line figure obscures what really happened across the state, which was the heavily white areas shifting heavily to Biden. Maybe not heavily, and then the more, especially Hispanic heavy and black heavy areas shifting to Trump. An unexpected trend, to say the least. And you can see that in areas like LA with that New York Times map showing extreme trends in the downtown areas, which are very minority heavy, compared to the more Beverly Hills kind of white areas. And I think it defies the logic we went into election day with to such a degree that it invalidates most of what we expect about politics these days.
Right, and I'm just looking at some of the data now. Just as a bit of a spoiler, I'm using Wikipedia. I'm not sure what's going on the other side of this, but I can't seem to find some of the data. So I'm sort of just going based on my intuition because some of the data hasn't been posted to Wikipedia yet. But I noticed that much in line with what happened in other parts of the country, the wider portions of California shifted, particularly suburban areas, shifted left, and what was, and as well as you said, Latino and African American portions shifting right. And I think that one area where this was particularly pronounced was California 21st. David Valadao actually reclaimed the seat from Democrat T.J. Cox, who I believe had some ethics issues, but the district itself shifted right. I think that Biden just barely got into the double digits, whereas Hillary Clinton, I think, took it by 16 points the last time. So I'm guessing this is in line with what you were saying, or was it Valadao's strengths, or was it T.J. Cox's weaknesses that put him over the line?
Well, Cox was never a natural fit for that district in the first place. He should not have won in 2018 and only lost because we got lazy everywhere. But I do believe Trump still lost the seat by like 10, 15 points. I don't have the exact figure. So it really is Valeo's strengths that won him that seat. Strengths that he's been demonstrating since he won it in the first place. I mean, if you look at the other election results, he's been doing very well for a very long time, with the exception of 2018.
Yeah.
But I think the most notable thing for a district like this is the increase in the number of votes. I mean, just looking here, I mean, almost 40,000 in 4 years. I mean, that's a tremendous increase. To a degree that makes any analysis of any trends almost a waste of time, in my opinion, because there's so many new voters that a trend is just more people. It's not people changing. It's not differences in persuasion or anything. It's just more raw votes.
Right, and I actually would be very curious to see what. Do you remember what the shifts were in Orange County? Did Biden overperform, underperform, or was it the same?
Well, just as a backdrop, if you want to look at the map that I put in the script, or not the script, but your
Yeah.
document there, I think it's very illustrative of the trends. And I've published maps such as this, but
Yeah, we should.
Uh,
I think we should have started off with that introduction. But yeah, talk about that.
well, I think I mean, we all kind of expected some shifts among Asians, for example, just because Trump had done so poorly among them 4 years ago that it's difficult to get worse. And plus, Dems haven't exactly covered themselves in glory with them lately. But I think the Hispanic trends are way beyond what any of us expected across the board. I mean, it's one thing to say, we were all surprised when, Miami-Dade was coming out, wondering, can these trends be replicated elsewhere? And while obviously it's difficult to beat the 60-point swings they saw there, the trend was nevertheless clear. Um, and so I do believe he lost by more than he did in 2016, but he lost among people, especially the whites in Newport Beach and in the eastern part of that, I forget what they call that. Um,
Right.
those are people who generally vote Republican for everything else. And so, yeah, he definitely did not lose. He got a higher share of the vote, a lot higher share than the vote than he did last time.
Yeah,
Um,
and it
and
seems
so I
like
think it portends well for our continued control of the county. We had um in one of the Board of Supervisors district, was it District 1? Yes, it was. Now, District 1 is sort of the northern portion of the district. And it's a very blue. Oh, no, it's not. That's District 4. District 1 is basically on the swing map, all of that red um in the Vietnamese area. Now, that district went for Hillary Clinton by like 25 points. And our man still managed to win narrowly. Andrew Du, very good man. Um, Sort of indicating that the trends that we've seen against Trump in these areas, I mean, as you can see, we're still blue areas, did not extend down ballot as we feared. So I think it's good news all around.
now. I guess I definitely want to move on. Definitely want to talk about the congressional districts, but staying on local elections, let's move south to San Diego County. I'm trying to just see here if the I forget whether or not Democrats were able to take control of the Board of Supervisors. I know they won the mayoral race. Did they
I
flip?
think they did. If I
Okay.
remember correctly, our person lost, which was not surprising. Even in San Diego, we did not do that well in San Diego. We didn't get completely murdered as expected, but let's see.
This is what the freedom of having no video allows us to do. But yeah, I just it's very quickly just I know that
Yes, overwhelmingly, we lost the Board of Supervisors.
yeah, that's what I figured. I do know. I think that there was a district that I think in 2016 voted for Trump narrowly, and I think two Republicans advanced in that seat.
Yeah,
Um,
District 2 was not supposed to be competitive and didn't end up being. I mean, if you look at the list of places that are in it, they don't scream lots of Dems. District 3 is the problem. In a district that we had held in 2016, we lost by 16 points, which is kind of a problem.
but yeah, I
Uh,
guess. Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, please.
No, what I'm saying is I guess coming back to congressional districts, what I found really interesting was the fact that Biden sort of held his own in districts like California 39. I think he won it by the same amount. California 48, he only won that one narrowly, but Hillary Clinton also only won it narrowly. Nevertheless, Republicans reclaimed those seats.
Well, in the case of, um, well, I mean, both of them were tremendously close in 2018. Well, 48 should have been, but we both know why it wasn't. And that was a candidate quality problem.
Yeah, Dana Rohrabacher.
Um, yeah. I probably would have, and I think I publicly endorsed the Dem in that race because of how bad he was.
Mhm.
Um, but in a large part, I think it just comes down to candidate quality. I mean, both of their wins were not by a lot, nor were they terribly beyond the expected result. I mean, in the governor's race, for example, I think Newsom lost them both, or they were very close.
Yeah, I think I certainly think California 39, 45, and 48, I think may have voted for Cox.
Yeah, we won 39. What was that? Oh, 48. And then, yeah, overwhelmingly won 48. So I think a large part of 2018 was just, it's not luck, but our strategy was terrible. Our turnout was terrible. Dems had a huge enthusiasm advantage, and quite frankly, our people didn't. So
Right.
I think a lot of the trends, so to speak, are not going to be that helpful. Um, I mean, all data is helpful, but there's going to be always a problem, especially because a lot of the turnout patterns in 2018 are not probably ever going to be replicated again
Right.
with super high white Democrat turnout, but still remaining low Hispanic turnout just in general.
Right.
Which obviously wasn't the case this time.
Yeah, and Hispanics came out, but they didn't come out for the candidate that we all thought they were going to come out for.
No, they came out much more competitively than expected.
And that was
Which
particularly true, not just in California, but also in the Rio Grande Valley, where there were rural counties that had chronically low turnout. Democrats have talked a good game of when those voters come out that Democrats will win. Well, they came out, and they came out for Trump.
yeah, well, they came out for all Republicans on the ballot, including our congressional candidate. I think it is it. I forget which Texas it is specifically, but to where we held it within 3 points. It's like a D15 district.
Mhm.
That we almost won. Way beyond expectations, including probably our own internal ones, because from what I had heard, we poured most of our resources into the suburbs in Dallas, Fort Worth, and all these other places, because that's where we thought the front line was.
Right.
Um, Obviously, it was. The Rio Grande Valley is more useful of trends rather than anything else because there's still not that many votes in most of these counties.
Right. So what I'm wondering is if it's in terms of the trend in Texas, is it going to slow down the inevitable, or if there's it's really going to keep it red?
Well, I think it destroys the inevitable because, I mean, even my thinking before the election was that the increase in Hispanic turnout was going to kill us.
And it
If
did not.
if and I ran models on this, if all white voters voted the same way they did in 2018 in the Senate race, we were going to lose Texas with the increase in Hispanic turnout. Now, obviously, that didn't remotely happen. And it proves, I think, to everybody that just because the electorate gets more minority heavy doesn't mean it's going to automatically get significantly bluer.
But I've sometimes wondered whether or not that'll be more counterbalanced or more than counterbalanced by the shifts in the big cities. Like I have a theoretical map in mind for how Texas going blue, and it involves some of those rural Rio Grande Valley counties that went for Biden actually going red, but it's made up for by the Democrat not only winning Tarrant but also winning Collin and Denton, and also winning Bell County, which is where Killeen is.
Well, I think that is a legitimate fear, but at the same time, it didn't happen this time.
Right.
Not only did Trump hold his own in most of those areas, but the rest of our people um, won them overwhelmingly. I mean, even the state house where we ran even in a lot of these suburban seats that went heavily for Beto and then went for Biden, that we won.
Right.
So if those, it could certainly happen, but I think the certainty that we all talked about it with is gone.
Right. So I just coming back to California for a second. I have to say the biggest surprise for me of the 2020 election was Republicans being able to hold on to California 25. That Mike Garcia was a fantastic candidate, and the assumption was that that when there's full turnout, when everyone comes to turn out, that the Democrats are going to flip that seat. That did not happen. Garcia defeated Smith once again, and I'm guessing that was also candidate quality because Trump certainly didn't win that district.
No, although he didn't get completely murdered in it either. I mean, do they have the 2020 stats?
Yeah, Wikipedia has
Maybe
been
they don't. No, they don't.
surprisingly
But
unhelpful.
no, well, you can blame LA County for that. But the problem was the confidence that a lot, say on election Twitter, that expressed that an increase in Dem and Young turnout would swamp us in CA25. Not realizing that the special, we won by a lot. We won by almost 10 points.
Right.
And an electorate shift in such a short amount of time is not going to make that, a lean D district, as some had suggested. And also, Smith was absolutely horrible.
Yeah, and Jenya
Probably the
Coulter.
worst. Cox is probably a close second, but Garcia is Smith is one of the worst Dem candidates chosen,
Right.
simply because she could not stop shooting her own foot.
Yeah,
I mean, that
and
whole the law books thing, defending the Dem who had resigned. I mean, she didn't exactly make it difficult for us.
yeah, and
I still remember my shock on special election night when the
right.
results
No,
came in.
when I saw the first results, I knew that this was over. And the truth is, Jenya Coulter, I think, was one of the few people who was actually raising the alarm on that, on telling Democrats not to rest their laurels on that, and she turned out to be right. But I guess what I guess I was surprised by the margin, though not really because it was a special election environment. But I mean, I really chalk it up to candidate quality on Garcia's side. But I just, I
Well,
guess, you go ahead.
well, that's partly true, but it also it goes in such great contrast to the other special elections we've seen, where we generally get blown out by a lot,
Right, I
just
guess,
because of Dem enthusiasm.
right, exactly. But I guess that in a district like California 25, which is a third Latino, it's turnout is something that's hard to predict because I'm not sure if this is still the case, but traditionally many Latinos have been low frequency voters.
Well, they're not voters at all in many cases,
Right,
especially the problem. And especially this comes up a lot in redistricting is we say it's 33% Hispanic. It's not. The electorate is probably 20%, if that.
right,
The electorate in most of these places, especially in 2018, where Hispanic turnout was even lower than expected, and even the share of registered voters that are Hispanic is very low. Sadly, they do not publish really good statistics on a lot of um, racial data for so far as turnout. This isn't Texas or Florida. Um, but you can see the trends in turnout. Um, but I think the fact that, because what a lot of people assumed is that we would get swamped in the LA County portion
yeah, that's
of
what
the
I thought
district. We
too.
do fine in Ventura, but the LA County portion would murder us.
Right,
But it went like 51-49 for Smith. I mean, it was an extremely narrow result. And we did fine. We actually probably did not win the Ventura portion as heavily as expected. It just didn't matter.
yeah, and I guess
It was
this is
51 to
yeah
49.
this is a time for I guess it's hot take time. I guess would Katie Hill have held the seat?
Not with her scandal out. She would have done just as bad.
Okay,
The only thing, it is difficult to guess though whether or not Garcia's limited incumbency would have losing that would have hurt him just enough to lose. I mean, the margin was what, 500 votes, 300 votes, yeah. I mean, so virtually almost anything could have changed it, sure. But with Hill's scandal, I mean, it's difficult to see her winning, especially because she has a lot of the same attitudes. I mean, her and Smith Mays will be the same person in a lot of respects.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I saw them as carbon copies of each other. Um,
Yeah.
I guess what I'm wondering is because this was, I think, the first time in 22 years Republicans flipped a congressional district in California. Is this the makings of a Republican comeback in the state?
Well, I mean, after the massacre that was 2018, a comeback really only resets us to where we were before.
Right. I
Um, but really, I mean, no, I mean, you saw kind of a different, like in the assembly, for example, I don't believe any seats changed hands.
you're right. I think in the state
But
Senate, Democrats made gains.
in the Senate, we got massacred. Like it was the Senate, we kept it closer than I thought we would in a lot of seats. There was a lot of narrow elections,
Right.
for the Senate and the Assembly, but I do believe in the
Oh,
Assembly, we did significantly better. Did we lose any seats?
correction about the state house. Christy Smith's seat sent two Republicans to the general
Yeah,
election.
yeah. I think that protected us against.
Um, what I'm what I there was also a seat that I think was hotly contested where I think the Republican incumbent I think was in third in the top two primary, and I believe that Janet Nguyen I think was the one who held that seat, the Republican, who actually went up against Deirdre Nguyen. So it was two people with the same last name versus each other, but the Republican ended up holding that seat. So
Yeah,
that was
we gained one.
oh yeah, that was Christy Smith's seat.
Yeah. But just so far as avoiding any loss, well, technically we actually went even because we lost a seat to that. We'll call him a traitor just to be antagonistic. Our former so-called leader, as soon as I remember his name. But Chad Myers, yeah, he ran as an independent and won.
Yeah. Um,
Um,
I
but
mean,
overall, I think the picture is brighter today than it was in November of 2018.
it, it certainly is when you actually look at the fact that there were a number of conservative issues that ended up passing, like exempting Uber from AB5 and rejecting affirmative action, and I believe retaining the tax structure that currently exists there. So there was a number of conservative victories in terms of issues.
Yeah, the only issue that we didn't win anything on was criminal justice. Well, I mean, I guess we defeated
We
some more liberal initiatives, but
we defeated
we did
the
not
anti-cash
succeed in
bail.
our, yeah, but we did not succeed in our sentencing enhancement bit.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, overall, the electorate is probably more right wing than they vote, in partisan issues.
yeah.
But I mean, a lot of these are not particularly Republican things. I mean, we oppose affirmative action as a matter of course, but it's not an issue singularly leaked to it. It's not guns or something where we still get blown out of the water. The only one that really surprised me was the margin of the rejection of the allowing 16-year-olds to vote in primaries, or that'd be 17.
Oh yeah,
That was really the only shock.
17 if they were 18 by the general
Yeah. I
election.
mean, even I voted for that.
Yeah.
Um, but the electorate obviously felt differently.
There was actually a measure in Colorado. I've noticed that lowering ages doesn't seem to be an issue that's catching on in some areas. I think in 2018 there was a measure that would have allowed. I think the current age to run for the state legislature there is 25. It would have lowered the age I think to 21 or something, and it did not succeed. So
Yeah. Well, then even the state voted a few years ago to raise the smoking age to 21. So
yeah,
the
so
electorate is small c conservative, I think, in a lot of ways.
yeah,
Preserving the status quo is a very popular trend across the ballot propositions, even on the local level.
well, I mean, not on marijuana, specifically California or nationwide.
Well, just in California. I mean, nationwide, that's fairly typical, but
Right. No,
just in California, most changes get rejected.
yeah.
Um,
So to the extent that I think conservatives have hope for California, it's through the initiative process, because that's where conservatives really can shine.
Yeah, although the process is fundamentally biased against us, with the Attorney General writing utterly biased descriptions and then refusing to defend the initiatives when they pass, in court, as happened with Prop 8.
Right. The Prop
Um,
8 is the one that bans same-sex marriage.
yeah. So, because the state refused to defend that, so a private party had to come up and do it. So it's not a perfect process given how little we control, but it works.
It does. I guess sort of extrapolating out from California, sort of more nationwide. I mean, where does the shifts that we see, within California and elsewhere in the country, like fit into the grander picture? Like, are we looking at a state like Georgia or a state like Arizona, which neighbors California, like stampeding to the left, while other states like Florida and Texas and North Carolina stay light red for the foreseeable future?
Well, I mean, had 10,000 votes flipped, 6,000 votes flipped in Georgia, we'd be having a completely different conversation. Um, so I don't think Georgia or Arizona are headed that way yet, especially given our state level people did fine in both states. We held, surprisingly to me, we held the Corporation Commission, we held the state Senate and state House in Arizona
I
under
mean,
very difficult maps, I might say.
there were not a lot of
Um,
people expecting that the Georgia legislature would flip.
no, it's not a competitive legislature. The problem for Dems in Georgia is that they're way too easy to pack into Atlanta.
Yeah.
They will have to win that state by 15 points to have a chance of taking the state legislature.
Although as Atlanta dominates more and more state politics, it's gonna become it's gonna shift more districts towards Atlanta and towards the big source of Democratic votes. You know,
Well, I mean, we as an election Twitter have been trading around Georgia maps, since they published the new data. And the overwhelming consensus is that more Dem districts will have to be added.
right.
Uh, the
So
average is about 4.
I mean, certainly in the long term, it seems to me that it, for some reason it just feels to me that like Georgia is now where Virginia was a decade ago, and Arizona now is where Colorado was a decade ago. Is there something that is missed by that analysis?
Well, I think it ignores the fact that while Virginia was a red state, in the 90s, it was still a purplish state. It was not as right wing as Georgia was 5 years ago, excuse me. Um, and so it's starting out from a much redder position. Um, it also has um much, shall we say, redder firm areas than Virginia or especially Colorado ever had, which helps buffer and helps us hold state legislatures much easier than we did in those states. And plus, at least in the case of Virginia, we will not have interesting courts striking down our nice maps,
Right.
which hurt us there quite heavily.
Yeah, and so at least for now, the Republicans are going to hold the Georgia Supreme Court. I actually forget whether or not Georgia judges are elected or whether Arizona judges are elected.
I thought I heard something about them canceling an election for one of the seats, so probably.
Right. So I mean,
But it doesn't matter because even our state level people did fine. Um,
right.
are they subject to retention? Nonpartisan statewide election, yeah. So, I mean, as we saw with North Carolina, where we swept everything, our judicial people outran our federal people, even in partisan races, with the exception of the Chief Justice seat, I guess.
Right. But I guess specifically with Arizona, I mean, the thing that I guess I have in mind is Atlanta dominates Georgia to the extent that many of these metropolitan areas dominate Virginia, and Arizona in particular, 60% of the population is in one county. Now, it's if the trends with Hispanics hold up, you could argue that there's maybe some hope for Republicans in Arizona, assuming, by the way, they dump the current chair of the party and actually try to reach out to those voters.
Well, well, I mean, honestly, I think just following our state level approach is enough. I mean, a lot of our candidates that won seats in those very difficult, especially in the eastern or the Mesa, area, held their state legislative seats all just fine. Well, we got massacred at the federal level in those areas. So talking about, and I think I said this in 2018, talking about the Hispanic vote in Arizona really isn't that helpful. Um, as for one, their turnout is way lower than it should be. And two, they're not the people that have been swinging. In fact, they probably swing towards us.
Right.
Well, as my maps have shown, they've swung towards us. But it's white suburbanites that are the problem. And they still vote Republican, usually at the local level. So I expect the picture to improve after January the 20th.
Right. And so I guess the hope is that Republicans are able to claw back some of what they lost. Because in Arizona, there is a governor's race coming up, as there is in Georgia. And one of the things I'm wondering is the red favorable environment going to counteract the trends and keep like, what do you think the margins in Georgia and Arizona could be in 2022?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming it's probably going to be maybe an R 3 to 5 year, probably.
Mhm.
Um, which just swinging it uniformly would indicate a victory for us by about 5 points.
Right.
Will demographics continue to hurt us? Probably more in Georgia than in Arizona, where things demographically are not really changing that fast.
Yeah,
Um,
in Arizona, they're not changing that fast.
Not really. I mean, there is certainly some degree of change, but certainly not as rapidly as Georgia. I mean, just for example, in Cobb County between 2016 and 2020, Dems gained 80,000 votes, whereas we gained seven. No, what would that be? 13? 13, yeah. 13,000 votes. I mean, that is a trend that we cannot sustain there. Whereas Arizona, I mean, it was what, 49 to like 47 in 2016, and it was what, 49 to 49 now.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about radical changes. I mean, we have districts, especially in Georgia, that we won by 15 points 5 years ago that we're now losing by 15 points. Whereas you don't really see the same thing in Arizona.
Right.
So Georgia is certainly a state to be scared in, but I don't think it's the new Virginia. Not yet. It could be if we continue to engage in this circular firing squad for ourselves.
And
Um,
so I guess what I'll say is, like, circling back to what I said about Arizona GOP chair name redacted. It seems like the Republicans, if they win Arizona in 2022, it'll be in spite of what they're doing.
well, Dunsi won in 2018 despite her colossally bad leadership. Um,
She was not chair of the party by that point. She had run for the Senate, in fact. I
yeah,
think
but she
she,
was around. She's been around for a long time. I don't believe the state party has a ton of power in a lot of these places, generally because they keep electing idiots. I mean,
yeah,
like Alan West is the chair of the state or the Texas GOP, and yet the Texas GOP did fine,
right.
better than fine, in fact.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no,
she's more a nuisance than anything else.
The Texas GOP really impressed me. It just seems to me like if Republicans want to learn from anyone, it should be two state GOPs, Texas and Florida, because my God, what happened in Florida? That they impressed once again.
Well, I think I don't know if I don't think anybody can compare to the Florida GOP. I think they're at a level beyond anyone else of being able to eke out victories regardless of the national environment
Mhm.
while providing for swings that are impossible.
Right,
Um, at a level where, we took a state Senate seat there that Hillary won by like 25 points. I mean, or by just an absurd margin.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, they are the experts.
there was a state house seat like Florida 26, I believe, was Clinton plus 16. It was Trump plus 6.
Yeah, one of those Cuban heavy seats, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um,
but it was
but even using Clinton's numbers is not horribly fair because he did very poorly in Miami-Dade compared to, say, Senator Rubio.
yeah,
But even the trends from 2018 were astounding.
yeah,
And we had a pretty good Miami performance back then.
yeah.
That has gotten even better to where we have a realistic chance of winning Miami-Dade in 2 years.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see. This is one of the things I mean, I expected that Miami would shift towards Trump. I did not see it shifting to the extent that it did, single digits.
Well, it wasn't just the swing, but the raw increase in Republican votes. I mean, it was what, 200,000?
Yeah, and Biden, I think, got about 6,000 less votes than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. I mean, just a beyond astounding. I mean, I think you'll remember the group chats when those numbers started getting out, the sheer panic among our left-wing friends. I mean, yeah, he did 7,000 votes worse and we gained almost 200,000.
Right.
Like just a remarkable accomplishment on their part
Yeah, no.
that I still can't really explain except that they're just really good at their job.
Yeah, and I think that if there's a model for the GOP in a diversifying America, it's the Florida GOP, more than the Arizona GOP, certainly. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, no, I think no one would argue that, to be honest.
no, the Arizona GOP is one that has a difficult job because the majority of Republican voters are not remotely like the majority of Arizona voters.
Right,
Whereas in Florida, the difference is less vast because of the size of the state.
right,
So they have to cope with every member of the coalition, from rural whites to the suburbs in Orlando to Cubans in Miami. I mean, they have to deal with this massive coalition, and they have a lot of experience dealing with that massive coalition, which is why they can hold it together regardless of what every other state is doing.
right. And uh, I just, to be honest, I have Marco Rubio as likely are going into the midterms at this point. Because Marco Rubio
That may be
actually.
a little too blue. No, I mean, if he wins the primary, which he should, he'll easily win. If there's no way that Dems have a chance, especially because they only have one viable statewide candidate. Well, I guess two. I guess Glenn Graham kind of, or not Glenn. What am I talking about? Gwen kind of counts.
What about Stephanie Murphy?
Well, that was the first person,
Right. No. So
but
yeah. So what I was going to say was the conventional wisdom seemed to be that Republicans would not gerrymander Stephanie Murphy out of her seat in order to convince her to stay in her seat and not run statewide. My thinking is that they're now going to aggressively gerrymander to dare her to run statewide because they now think that she has no chance.
well, the Tim Ryan approach basically, which only works with him. Um, but Florida's redistricting process is going to be a nightmare for all involved because of the rules. It'll be basically not as bad as Ohio, but the rules in Florida are going to make it difficult to draw a map like I would draw. Just this grotesque monster. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
the only saving grace is that the people responsible for interpreting all of those rules are all Republicans. So I don't. This election offers us a chance to be cleanly aggressive because we have so many raw or excess votes that can be tossed around everywhere. So we don't really need to be as aggressive. Ohio though is going to be a nightmare.
Yeah. No, I think anyone who has followed me knows how I feel about gerrymandering. But I have to say, if you followed Cameron, he does some of the most and I mean this in a complimentary way, some of the most abominable maps I have ever
Yes,
seen.
yes. If you've seen my California map, you'll know that cleanliness is not the objective.
Yeah. And
But it shouldn't be. I mean, if we're winning Miami-Dade, there's no point to being really aggressive. Or not
yeah,
not aggressive, but really unclean in the lines because
right.
we have the votes anyway.
So
I expect I expect them to go 20-9. That would be my guess for their
20 to
target.
9.
Yeah.
Wow.
20? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
because that's what we can get away with. And it should be the only thing that we're gonna run into litigation trouble with is gonna be the North.
right, because high African American population.
Yeah. But it's not a majority, which is the position of the right wing side of election Twitter, that it is not a protected seat because you cannot. I've drawn a majority black seat in northern Florida, and you got to draw it into Orlando to do it.
Yeah, no, it's
Um,
and it's worth noting. I think that G.K. Butterfield's seat in North Carolina is no longer majority black. It's plurality white, in fact. This is North Carolina's first. That's in the black belt.
yeah. Well, they made it. They had to make it much wider to steal because originally it was a black rural pack district, but then they stole all those areas for the other district. It's not even here. I still have it as it's 45% black, 43% white, but it's probably white. It probably plurality white in its electorate. That's true. Um, North Carolina is going to be another game of chicken between each side because now that the North Carolina Supreme Court is only has a majority of one for Dems, 4-3, and our guy controls the initial redistricting panels that will review the maps. We have the ability to be more aggressive than the current maps. Not as bad as the ones we originally passed,
Right.
or the ones that Dems passed 2 decades ago, but
I
we
think
have
that
probably more leverage than we had before.
I think that Democrats still control the state Supreme Court, but I think it's now a one-seat majority at the
Yeah.
moment. So if Democrats wanted to, if Republicans wanted to try a delay style mid decade redistricting, then they could probably do that by 2023.
Well, all we have to do is get the litigation past 2022. We can
Right.
pass we can pass a really aggressive map at the end of 2021 and then just to fight a delaying action for a year until because I think all the rest of the Dem seats are up in 2022, so they will lose one of them at least, if not all of them.
Right.
Um,
What do you think is going to happen in Kansas? Because Republicans held their supermajority in the legislature, but there are some Republicans who, to all intents and purposes, vote like Democrats. So what I'm wondering is, do you think Republicans will be able to override Laura Kelly's veto and screw Sharice Davids out of her seat?
Not only do I not think we can do it, but I would not do it. Kansas is getting too blue to sustain a 4-0 map.
Is the same thing happening in
Um,
Omaha, or actually, we'll talk about Kansas first, then we'll go to Nebraska.
the same, well, just to start, the same is not happening in Omaha. Um, but in Kansas, the fundamental problem we have is that we rely on the suburbs to win that state. That's why that idiot Kobach lost and why it's so difficult to draw seats that he won because of how badly he did in the suburbs.
Although I think, as others
Um,
have pointed out, Kobach's biggest underperformance was out west, meaning compared to Trump's performance.
well, but there's nobody who lives out west. So the margins, that's probably true. But where it actually counts, we're in the suburbs around each of the two cities whose names I forget.
Um,
Um, Kansas City and whatever they call that, one in the middle.
Topeka,
But
or,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But a 3-1 map would be much better, especially because if we remember in 2018, we went in thinking the map would be 2-2.
Oh
I mean,
wow.
we got well because we lost the urban seat, and then even the suburban seat was really close.
Oh yeah,
way closer than it should have
Steve
been.
Watkins only won by like 1 point.
Yeah, and utterly unacceptable. Yeah, less than 1 point.
Yeah,
Now we did better this year, that's true, but I think the risk, especially because the Kansas GOP is usually at war with itself, we cannot afford competitive seats in that regard. So I would absolutely draw a Dem pack.
right.
Um, you don't need to do it as aggressively as I did, but something to protect that suburban seat from future losses, because as Dems point out, the state is going to keep getting bluer.
Well, let's talk about some of the
Um,
places where we are going to get the short end of the stick. I'm thinking about Maryland. I'm thinking about possibly Illinois, New York. Do Democrats did Democrats get the votes in New York State Senate?
yes.
Okay, so they have the votes to pass a gerrymander in New York.
The only thing to say, I mean, in Illinois, it doesn't sound like they have the votes for the most aggressive thing because they kicked Manigan out, right?
Yeah, they got Madigan out.
So we're probably not going to lose seats there. The Dems are definitely going to shore up their people, but I don't think we're going to
Right.
take any real losses. Maryland, we have 1 seat. That doesn't matter. And he's an idiot anyway. So
Yeah.
we're
And
not really losing anything there. New York is a curious example because the state's geography and the VRA limit how aggressive they can be
right, but
because it is exceptionally difficult. I've tried to route because you can't route the Hispanic and black neighborhoods up because then you won't get enough VRA districts.
right,
Um, but it is exceptionally difficult to route the white enough of the deep blue white areas in New York to wipe us out upstate.
right.
Um,
So I guess I'll just point out some of the things that I have seen or heard talked about. It's the idea of packing because New York is going to lose a seat, but I this is not taking into account the fact that they may actually be on the edge of losing a second seat. Um, from what I've heard people talking about. Um,
these are both going to be our seats, regardless of the
yeah,
even if they, because I mean, the Long Island people, they can be wiped out easily.
right.
Staten Island can easily be cut up into 5 pieces and shipped off to
Right.
Manhattan.
So what I've seen is Long Island packing Republicans into one seat and then other two being Democratic. I've
There's little
seen
point to that. There's no way they wouldn't just completely eliminate us.
right. I've
They
seen
absolutely have the votes to do that nearby.
yeah. I've seen Staten Island drawn into an even bluer part of Brooklyn and and basically have that the Brooklyn part overwhelm the Staten Island portion.
Yeah.
Nope.
No. Yeah, that's exactly what you would do. You could cut the island in half and ship it even further, but cleanly it is not difficult to make it impossible. But how many seats do we even have in New York? 5?
Uh, I think we had 6 coming out of the election, and we lost John Faso, Dan Donovan, and Claudia Tenney, and I believe that of those two, Nicole Malliotakis flipped back the Staten Island-based district, and Claudia Tenney appears to have made a comeback.
That changes every day. That's a number that changes literally every day. Yeah, all right, we technically have 7 seats with one undecided, but I mean, we really only have an opportunity to lose maybe 4 of them just because of the protection that narrow, because there's only so many precincts that this is the eternal, this makes Bacon Manders very difficult. There's only so many precincts across that Cambridge section, above the city that you can route districts through. So
One of the more sort of clever things that I've seen proposed by Democrats was putting shifting Wayne County from Catco to Tom Reed, and then putting the very blue Tompkins County in John Catco's district. Uh,
that would probably
Tompkins,
still not be enough to get rid of him. He's
right?
our best man.
Yeah, no, and so that's what someone's talked about. It's the idea of putting Ithaca into John Catco's district, but that's basically about what I've seen proposed.
The
And yeah, go ahead.
No, just the problem is with the upstate areas is that there's still, I mean, upstate, it was a pretty narrow presidentially and most of our people outrun the top of the ticket on the local level. Is that there's only so much you can do with the Albany area and the Utica area. There's only so much that can be done. So you need votes from the city to really do aggressive things. And there's only so much you can do with that. So I would still predict that there will be 3 red seats, at least after redistricting.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be at least
Um,
three.
eh,
Certainly, they're not going to get Stefanik out of Congress.
no, those upper areas it'd be very dangerous for them. I mean, you remember in 2014, we almost took, um, was it 10? What was it?
Was it was it Steve Israel? I don't know.
No, it was, whatever that district in, I'll eventually find it. It was one of the most shocking results. It's like, it
Oh,
was
no,
like
that was in Rochester. It was 25.
yeah. A seat we had absolutely no right being competitive in, that we almost won. I mean,
Yeah.
and so a dummy mander with purely upstate areas, especially in that western portion, would be very dangerous, um, to do. And I
Right.
don't know if they would be willing to risk that when there are cleaner way, there are things, I mean, they'll end any chance of us ever, taking back the Senate or being competitive elsewhere. I mean, that's par for the course these days.
So
But
let's get back to the very fun stuff, which is how Republicans are going to draw the maps. Because I noticed that when Stephanie Bice unseated Kendra Horn, Oklahoma, there are obviously ways to draw the map in such a way that you shore all those districts up. In South Carolina, when with Nancy Mace defeating Gunningham, how do you shore that up? Because like when you look at South Carolina's political map, I'm like, how do you make that redder?
you cut the, you cut the coast into 3 red districts instead of just one. And
Wow.
you force large portions of the districts to each have northern components around Charleston so that the
Right.
coast swinging against us doesn't screw us in any of the seats.
But then you're stretching the district into the black belt.
You don't have to, you route it around the black areas in the middle of the state. Let me find my
Yeah, no, South
map where I
Carolina
do
is always a
this.
fascinating one because of the black belt. I'm like, it's interesting to see how you would draw the map in such a way that you shore up all those districts.
Like, see here, I cut it into 3 portions.
Mhm.
Let me just DM you this picture.
Yeah, and I guess Omaha, like Nebraska, they the way that seems obvious is that is splitting Omaha.
Well, I cut it into 3 portions, but I don't think they have the votes to do that.
Oh, because Nebraska's legislature is nonpartisan.
But I think you need a super majority to clear legislation. I think they have a filibuster in Nebraska.
Oh yeah, they
And I
do.
do not believe we won enough seats. 'Cause it's nonpartisan in theory, but everybody knows which party each person belongs to.
Mhm.
Um, so that will make it difficult to make that aggressively much redder.
Yeah.
But there's stuff at the margins that you can easily do. And we outperform Dems enough there anyway to not cause too much trouble.
Right. And just looking at your map in South Carolina, uh, I guess margins would be helpful, but that does it looks like yeah, that looks effective.
What is the latest? Well, take the governor's race. I mean, the weakest one there is 57% for us. I mean,
That's the new South Carolina one.
no, just all of them. The weakest one is, where do I include the numbers? Is the one that dives into the white parts of Columbia. Um, An area
Yeah,
that I do believe we need to focus more on. If we continue to regress there, we're gonna have trouble.
right.
But as it stands, what happened in 2018 along the coast should not be repeated.
Mhm.
Especially because we beat the only guy capable of doing it. And we don't have a, as incompetent as a candidate as we did before.
I was hearing the crew on Elections Daily talk about Iowa about a couple weeks ago. Is I like going state by state here. It just I do Republicans try for four red districts, or is it a much better bet to put a third district that's just Des Moines, Ames, and the surrounding area?
That's what I would do. Um, but especially if Dems detonate the nuclear weapon that is their review process and seat their person in the second district.
Oh, I hope they don't do that.
Um, oh no, one of the problems we're gonna have in Ohio or in Iowa is that the current rules as they stand ban us from implementing the map we would love to implement.
Split counties.
Yeah. Well, even without split counties, the counties are so small you can get away with a lot. But the problem we're going to have is that we need to override those rules, which we can do if we have the will. If Dems decide to do that, we will have the will to be extremely aggressive. Um, it would dummy Mander very quickly because you have to win the state to get 4-0. Um, I'm always a fan of a single pack in states like that.
Although, mind you, Republicans winning Iowa is a pretty sure bet at the moment.
Well, it is, but I mean, you'll remember that we said that 3 years ago and we lost 2 seats. So 2 years ago.
Right.
So um, there is a limit to that. Getting rid of Steve King though does mean that the area in the Northwest is as red as it should be now, and
Yeah,
thus can be used to shore up the other districts.
certainly.
Um,
Yeah, I guess moving on, I guess to Utah, sort of doing this a bit rapid fire. But I guess is do you split Salt Lake County four ways, or is the current map roughly what you would look? As I actually do know the state has an independent commission, but apparently a simple majority can override it.
yeah, even a supermajority, given we have that.
Yeah,
Um, the thing in Utah is that the areas below the Salt Lake areas are so red, you don't have to do that much to the current map to stop Dems from winning that seat.
right.
You don't really need to be that aggressive. I mean, even just splitting it 2 ways is fine.
Yeah.
You can imagine how hardcore my map was, but the what they will almost certainly do will make it red enough to where we do not have to keep having these close calls every 2 years. Um, although candidate quality is a large portion of that.
Right. I will have to see how well Burgess Owens is as a legislator.
As long as he doesn't say stupid things, he should be fine.
Yeah.
I never understood why Mia loved it as badly as she did.
I'm not sure. I'm guessing that it was Ben McAdams was a good candidate in a good year for Democrats. I think is what it came down
Well,
to.
but she's underperformed in the past before, and had a quite terrible reputation among, those who know
I'm not
for her ability to win.
I'm not sure why it is because I don't see anything wrong with Mia Love. I think that she might have been the best candidate to run this time around.
Because I mean, she ran against 3 Dems in her career, and each one of them, with the exception of 2016, was pretty narrow.
Yeah.
I mean, winning by 5 points in 2014, that's not acceptable.
Yeah. I think that what it is that the seat has down ballot Democratic heritage. That's what
Well, it does, but a lot of other Republicans won those areas. So I do think it was rather unique to her.
I honestly,
Why, I don't know,
I
but
don't know why. I think she's a great candidate and a great legislator. I just I don't know why the voters there didn't seem to think that.
well, I always liked her, but she was somebody who always threatened our ability to hold those seats.
Yeah. So I guess in
That seat.
Tennessee, Nashville gets split. In Indiana, Gary gets split. I'm assuming you would not want to go for 9-0 in Indiana, though.
9-0 is dangerous, but I don't believe splitting Gary is the right approach. I would draw a single blue seat between Indianapolis and Gary to remove any chance of those seats becoming a problem,
Right. I just
as one of them was this time around.
yeah, RRH Elections seems to think they had an article this year about splitting the Northwest.
I think I saw that map and it'll work, but they could be more aggressive and are likely to be since we have complete control.
Right.
So
Is a 6-0 map in Kentucky possible or not with the state rules?
it should be. I don't believe it doesn't matter if the governor has a veto since we have like 75% of the
Yeah.
seats.
Also, the simple majority overrides a veto in Kentucky.
Yeah, so I don't believe that seat is protected by the VRE either.
Right. But I think that Kentucky might have some sort of split county rule like Iowa does. It's just that I believe the conservatives actually won the Supreme Court this year in Kentucky. So they might now have the legal leverage to push a map like that through. But I would have to ask wiser men than me on this.
Let us see.
Yeah.
There's a lot of articles about it.
In Connecticut, while we're talking about Kentucky, Connecticut, I believe there's a supermajority requirement. I believe the governor doesn't have a say, but I think there's a supermajority requirement in Connecticut. Could Republicans leverage a seat in Connecticut?
I doubt it, especially as those areas got significantly bluer this time around.
Even Litchfield and the other end of the state?
Yeah, I mean, I've drawn a seat that we would win. I don't know if Trump won. It's going to be years before we get precinct data out of Connecticut. Um, but even my really border hugging seat would struggle to remain red. And he did very poorly in those areas.
Mm-hmm. Particularly the southeast, like I forget exactly what that county is called. It's Stamford and I believe Danbury. No, actually, maybe Danbury's in a different county. I'm gonna pull it up right now.
It's the north that really about not excluding the urban areas, obviously.
Fairfield. That's what I'm
That
trying to think of. Fairfield.
yeah,
You
but
know,
I mean, my
the New England is interesting because like the New York Times always shows the New England results by town rather than by county.
I don't think they have counties. I think that's probably why.
Yeah, they exist ceremonially or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's the case in Massachusetts at least.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's interesting to see. I like as a hobby poring over some of the results from the New England area because it's always fun maps to look at.
We are of the same mind.
I guess while we're pulling up Kentucky, I'm curious about whether Kristen Uno is going to take on Maggie Hassan.
I've heard rumors that say he's 100% in.
Oh, he's 100% in. Oh wow.
So, well, I mean, obviously only time can tell if that'll be true, but so long as, I mean, now that we have complete control, we have a chance to pass some very good reforms.
Yeah,
Um,
I was
especially given that as soon as they get around to it, we'll control the New Hampshire Supreme Court now.
yeah, I believe that Republicans. This may have just happened or it's about to happen. Republicans got like what a 9-0 majority on the Massachusetts Supreme Court or the Supreme Judicial Court, as it's called.
Well, I think Republican is probably a loose term in Massachusetts,
Right,
since if they get past the legislature, they may as well be Dems anyway.
right. What I was talking about what I was talking about with Drew earlier was that apparently in Vermont, Phil Scott broke the Democratic supermajority in the state.
I think he did, yes.
Yeah, he can now veto stuff.
Yeah. Whether he will or not, I mean, again, the only way people like that or our people get elected in those states is by being rather liberal.
Right.
Um,
I'm just sort
so
of surprised that Biden didn't offer Phil Scott a ceremonial position in the cabinet just as a token Republican, just to give the Democratic lieutenant governor the
he
governorship.
wouldn't take it. Nobody likes the lieutenant governor no, actually, they didn't like the old lieutenant governor, as
Right.
evident by the fact that he lost the state by like 40 points.
The current the incoming lieutenant governor, I think, only won by single digits.
Yeah. Our people in Vermont did reasonably well. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, he won. Yeah, Phil Scott won the state by, yeah, 41 points.
Oh wow, 41. I thought it was plus 30 or something like that.
Yeah, and well, the reason why the lieutenant governor position is that we had, Milne, Milne, and
Yeah,
he's a relatively popular Republican. He still lost by, what, 8 points, but,
yeah.
he's a well-known guy with a lot of, positive name recognition.
Apparently,
I
Democrats
think
have
he was
control.
even the governor at the time, or he narrowly lost in 2014, I think.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So New England Republicans, I think, were some of the biggest winners of this election this year. To be honest.
With the exception of, in Maine's first,
Yeah.
second.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the guy who ran against Jared Golden.
Yeah, federally, we didn't do terribly well,
Federally
but
not well.
on the state level, well,
Susan Collins.
yeah, she's the one exception, but even in other states, I mean, Vermont, with the exception of, I mean, we routinely get above a third of the vote. They shouldn't have a supermajority. In
Yeah.
Massachusetts, I think we lost Trump seats in the state legislature. In both Connecticut and Rhode Island, I don't think we did that well.
Right. One
I
of
think
the
we lost seats still.
one of the things that I sort of wonder is if had Hillary Clinton, this is sort of will tie into what could happen potentially in. By the way, are you able to pull up the Kentucky thing, or should I?
So far as what? Oh, the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm curious if Republicans will be able to have the legal authority to split Jefferson County.
Well, so far as their redistricting rules, a lot of southern states have restrictions on what courts are allowed to do. Let's see.
But until this year, the courts were on Andy Bashir's side. That might change now. So I'm actually going to pull up the Kentucky Supreme Court myself and see if I can figure out whether or not the courts are going to be on, because I do remember an incumbent in the primary lost re-election to a more liberal candidate, and I think that might have caused the Kentucky State Supreme Court to flip. In fact, why don't I do the next best thing and do a news search, because surely the election is not old enough to actually find reliable news sources to see whether or not the court flipped, right?
There doesn't seem to be, they seem to have a district system and sadly not a very partisan one.
Yeah.
Um, I see that they ban splitting counties for state legislative lines.
Oh, but not for congressional lines?
I don't know if they have any rules for.
Because I think the only reason why a small sliver of Jefferson County is in the fourth district is because Jefferson County is too big to just be in one district. Because there are
Yeah, and
over
that is an exception to that particular rule, but I don't know if they particularly, what article was it? 33.
yeah.
So,
So I'm wondering is, do you have the third and the fourth district split Jefferson County and drawn into the rest of the state?
I would cut it up more times than that, but yes,
Yeah.
almost certainly.
So it'll certainly be interesting to see what happens in Kentucky, because again, if Andy Bashir's lost the courts, then he's got no leverage, because a simple majority can override his veto. His veto is
He's got no
virtually
leverage anyway. Even if he had the courts, um, they would just keep passing the same maps over and over again. Court redraws are rarely popular, especially because they say that there's no restriction on mid-decade redistricting. So if we wanted to push the issue, we'd be able to get away with it.
Yeah. Um, certainly, we could just keep talking on and on about this. This is what I love about talking with you, Cameron. Um, are you able to continue, or do you want to?
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, so, what state haven't we talked about yet? New Mexico. Do they split east to west as opposed to north south in order?
I think this election, before this election, I would have said they're gonna murder us. Or they're gonna kick us out of that one seat. After, that would be a dummy mander.
Even splitting
I
it
mean,
east to west?
well, but even, I mean, if El Generico random dude gets 46% of the vote,
Yeah.
trying to go for even something remotely resembling a 3-0 map could instantly be a 0-3 map if things go the other way.
I mean, you could easily draw a 0-3 map that still includes one safe Democratic district centered on Albuquerque.
Well, but they'd have to use that to try to take us out, and that would be risky.
What I'm wondering is if they can draw two districts stretching from the more Democratic Native American north to the more Republican Hispanic south of the state.
They can try, but the VRA will hurt them a lot if they go too far. And if their turnout drops, they'll lose them both.
Right.
I mean,
Um,
I think even in that northern seat, didn't we get kind of close?
I'm not
Closer than we
sure.
should have.
I'm not sure. I'd have to actually look that up. But while I do that,
No, not really. Unless you count losing by only 18 points as close.
yeah, not really. Um, but what I'm curious about is Arizona and Colorado. Are we looking at 4-4 in Colorado and 5-5 in Arizona? Because I think there are independent commissions in both states.
They may. Um, it's difficult to say in those states because, well, we'll take Arizona first. We say independent, but we both know that the commission was not remotely independent last time,
Right.
having a practical Dem majority, and it is not going to be independent this time, given we dominate the body that has chosen the representatives, and all of them may as well be Republicans.
Wow. So
So we have thoroughly corrupted the process to our own end. The only thing that is going to hold us back is we actually need to be able to hold the seats we draw, and Arizona's going to make that difficult.
I've actually heard it said that in 20 before the 2019 elections, Virginia Republicans overextended themselves by drawing a 65-35 map. That had they drawn a 55-45 map, Democrats would not have flipped the House of Delegates.
Well, one could not foresee what was going to happen
Mhm.
back then, not remotely, especially there, because they had done quite well. And the map honestly did not do that bad. I mean, we lost by like a lot in 2017 and held the chamber.
Right.
Um, so the map did its job for as long as can be expected. Um, but we need to protect what we have, and we need to end the trend of us gaining more votes but them gaining more seats, which happened again.
Us getting more votes and getting more seats. I would hope that we gain seats as we gain votes.
Well, no, but I think Dems won 5-4 in Arizona, but we won like by a point in terms
Oh,
of the
oh wow. Yeah.
total number of votes. So the map does not work um, in terms of being proportionate, nor does it work in terms of us winning any seats. So fixing that, it'll likely be a 6-4 map in our favor
Mhm.
because they will be gaining a seat, which
Right.
should be possible without being too overly aggressive.
Interesting. And let's talk about the king of all redistricting. You mentioned a 29 map in Florida. What does Texas look like?
A significantly easier map than the one we were expecting to have to draw. I I don't think you've seen our my anti-Beto map, but it was seriously aggressive because of the fear that things were only going to get worse.
The state legislative map is a dummy mander by this point.
Well, it is, but it only is because of the rules. You can't leave the county.
Oh
So
wow.
drawing a majority cruise state house map was very hard.
Mhm.
Um, in fact, I don't even think I finished mine, but it's barely possible. Drawing a majority Trump map will be very easy. Um, the one thing that I think changes now versus, especially versus our expectation, is what we can do in the valley. Before the area was just, blue central, but now you can draw some relatively red districts in the area.
Can we? Is it possible to split all three of Brownsville, McAllen, and Loretto?
We're talking about the fajitas.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think they'll replicate the same concept, mostly because it's no longer necessary. The areas have gained enough voters and are Hispanic enough now to where the VRA does not require those really strange looking things to have practical Hispanic majorities.
Hmm.
Um, but I expect there to be at least one red seat among that lot.
I'm guessing it's going to be Vicente Gonzalez.
Well, the map will look totally different, so everything will be who knows what seat she can actually run in, but
Right.
it'll likely be a Corpus Christi heavy district.
Right. I don't know if you remember this, but Henry Cuellar, who's one of the more conservative Dems in Congress, and his district, I think, narrowly voted for Biden. He faced a primary challenge from Justice Democrat Jessica Cisneros, and I'm actually starting to wonder whether or not Republicans would have actually flipped the seat had
Yeah,
Cuellar
I,
fallen to
I
Cisneros.
get given the result in the seat right next door, she would have lost
Mhm.
to whatever rando we put up.
Yeah,
Which would have been very amusing, actually.
yeah,
But the one thing I do think we need to, and I generally don't caution, um, is that going back to 2018 is still possible. And so protecting our majorities must be the goal, at least on the state level.
yeah.
One thing we are going to run into, and I'm kind of surprised I haven't heard more about it, is that the Texas State Senate has a threshold to pass legislation.
Oh yeah,
It's basically a filibuster.
yeah. I think it
We don't
does.
have enough seats to do that anymore.
Right. So the Texas map
Um,
could change in Democrats' favor.
well, the threshold used to be 2/3.
It's 3/5, I think.
It's 3/5 now, which kind of implies that the rule will just be changed again.
Oh, the rule will
I
be changed
think
again.
I think the lieutenant governor can nuke his way past it.
Mhm.
Um, but
Uh,
I mean, even if they don't, the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, which is probably the most right-wing Supreme Court in the country,
it's 9-0, I think.
yeah, um, will draw the map and probably be even more aggressive than the state legislature because they won't care about defending incumbents.
Mhm. One of the things I had in mind, I probably this is an idea that no one was thinking, but that in the valley that you have one heavily urban district on Hidalgo County, and then the other two split off, and you could get potentially two Republican districts there.
It's possible.
I mean,
We'll have to wait for the precinct data to know if such a thing would be viable long term.
right?
Because having the map, we don't want to be the Arkansas Dems of 2020. That would not be good.
Yeah,
Where the
Republicans in
map
Arkansas,
immediately fails.
yeah, and Republicans in Arkansas are pretty much going to shore everything up there, right?
Yeah, they're gonna cut. The one thing we do need to, I mean, it didn't happen, but removing fears of the Little Rock seat flipping would be nice.
Yeah. No, and there were some people who had the idea of a district that's Little Rock stretching to the Black Belt of Arkansas, and they created somehow a Clinton +7 district. I don't know how that would have held up this year though, because the
It probably would. I mean, even though we did pretty well among those river areas, um, I
yeah
doubt. I don't think the swings were that high too of where Dems would have lost that. But there's no reason to draw such a thing. It it's
yeah
not going to be majority black, so there's no reason for us to
right. So there's
surrender such a thing.
right.
Especially
So
given we win the state by 20 points easily.
yeah, no. I think Arkansas was one of the states that shifted right from 2016.
Yeah.
Um, just a quick question. Before, the big issues that's on everyone's mind is the Georgia Senate races. But before that, I want to ask a question that's on only a few people's minds, and that is the Chicago suburbs. Because one of the things I'm wondering is Marie Newman's seat. Is that a viable target in 2022?
I doubt it. Didn't she win by like 25 points?
I think that Biden only won by 8 points. Actually, that could be based on only election night data, though. I'm actually Illinois third. That was the one that had that pro-life Dem Dan Lipinski.
Yeah. She won by what? 14? 13?
I am actually going to look up the results
Yeah,
now.
yeah, I found
And
it. Yeah.
what do you know? 2020 is not on the Wikipedia page yet.
No, no, no. Illinois third. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was. I'm actually surprised it's that close looking at where it is.
yeah, no. I do know that. So I mean, it's possible that this is a more white working class part of the Chicago suburbs. It's also worth noting. I think it's also home to the only town in Chicago itself that voted for Trump.
Well, but if you look at like the 10th district, we got massacred.
Right,
If we can't win that, we're not gonna win anything else in Chicago.
right. So I'm just wondering if long term that's a more viable target than say Sean Casten.
Well, obviously, well, ironically, we didn't do that bad in that district, did we? In fact, that was our best of the districts that's not Underwoods.
You're right.
But if we had run somebody mildly competent, we probably would have won.
Oh yeah. Like I've heard what I found what really funny was the fact that in 2018 the National Review actually endorsed Gene Eves for governor in the primary.
I can't say I've ever heard of him.
Gene Eves is the candidate that ran against Sean Casten this year. She ran to challenge Bruce Rounder.
Oh, I remember her. Yeah, yeah. She's so maybe even a better candidate in that district would have flipped it.
Yeah. So I mean I don't think a lot of people conventional wisdom is that she was a strong candidate. Neither was Jim
Yeah.
Oberweis, even though he nearly won.
Yeah. But we should have won that seat. He's run for that seat, what, a dozen times?
Yeah. And
I mean,
Sean Parnett. Sorry, go ahead.
no, he's one of those people, which is kind of funny actually that going back to Iowa, our perennial candidate finally won.
Yeah.
Depending on if they seat her, I guess.
I mean, conventional wisdom is that they would seat her. If Democrats are
Or
not
keep her seated,
hypocrite.
I should say.
Yeah.
Well, this is not the first time Dems have done this kind of thing, so.
Oh boy, I would hate to learn about the other times that this has happened.
Well, I mean, there was that, I think it was the Bloody Eighth in Indiana that Dems stole after the election. I mean, as I think Eric posted about it, about how even Olympia Snowe was vowing revenge
Yeah.
for their actions in that
Yeah.
race.
Larry Buckshaw's seat is I think was at one time a swing district and now it's a Republican district. Because
Yeah,
this is at a time when the southern portion of Indiana was actually competitive, and that seems like a very strange time now.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of that going around, I think.
But let's talk about, I guess, let's finish off. I definitely would want to talk more. I could talk for hours about redistricting, but we should definitely have you on again sometime. But let's talk about Georgia Senate races. Where do things stand as far as you see them? Because a month ago I would have said Republicans are favored. I'm not so sure anymore.
I'm honestly frightened. Um, the signs are not good. Of course, I mean, we said the same thing before this or the last election, and look what happened.
Yeah.
So waiting by our expectations last time and what actually happened, doing the same thing here still shows us winning, but we've not run a good campaign.
Yeah, particularly
This whole $2,000 check thing has been a total cluster.
yes, yes. And it seems like that the Republicans and both the Republicans have tried to have it both ways.
Well, luckily, both of them quickly endorsed such an idea.
Mhm.
So they were smart enough not to oppose it openly, especially given both their reputations as out of touch
Yeah, and,
rich people.
but
But
particularly the fact that both of them were involved in a insider trading scandals.
which I don't believe have proved terribly painful for them,
Mhm.
mostly because nobody cares.
Right,
Um, but whatever happens, it's going to be close,
right.
way closer than it should be. Um, but since I would honestly say that nothing has changed since November, and in the straight vote, they both won in November. Well, Republicans in the special at least
Yeah,
won over the Dems. So, I mean, I would still say it's with no toss up, it's still lean R, but it's
without
a
a
toss up. And
ironically without a runoff, Purdue would have held the seat.
yeah. Um, although, I mean, well, I mean, the problem is that everybody's looking at these early voting figures when it's just cannibalization. It's the same. We've been doing this a long time.
If it's truly,
Since
I mean, if it is cannibalization, then you're right. But what if it's not?
well, I mean, I saw somebody posting something about it's not, and the way they were doing it was not accurate in my opinion. But we've already done that's why I keep coming back. We've already done this type of Dems. They crush us in the early vote, and then the same day votes come in. Um, you'll remember what well they counted them the other way around. But if the order of ballots had been reversed, Biden would have had a very big lead among
Yeah.
mail-in ballots, well as we had a very big lead among election day ballots.
So
Now, luckily, I've heard the weather's good. Um, our people are angry and are hyped. It's very useful. Um,
it's also so it's going to overcome the fact that Trump and some of his surrogates have seemingly been doing everything to discourage their own base from showing up.
well, his surrogates have. Trump, ironically, has not generally been, despite his tweets against the governor and such. He
Mhm.
has not taken the insane approach of Wood, for example, of telling people not to vote.
Right.
So that has helped. Um, but it is still fundamentally, unless your name is Donald, it is still fundamentally a state with more Republicans than Democrats. If we get our people out, we will win.
Okay. So right now I have I guess so far I've had three different people comment on this race today, and now you've had your say. So we'll see what ends up happening. I think that early voting is ending today, in fact.
Yeah, I am curious what Eric said.
Yeah. So hopefully everyone will get to see the different recordings that I did today and get to decide for themselves what ends up happening, and we'll see who ends up being the wiser. Cameron, I would love to have you back sometime to talk more redistricting.
I'm sure next week will be a lot of fun.
Sure. Have a great rest of the day in the meantime.
You too.